I'm standing here in front of one of my favorite roses. Its favor is growing appreciably as time goes on. It is the floribunda rose, Julia Child, and I'm sure she would have been proud. It is a floribunda rose, a cluster rose, but it is atypical for the floribundas. The floribundas are known for being low slung, maybe as wide as they are high, and often under 3 feet. And this one approaches 4 plus 5 feet and is a little more upright, but still gives you a nice rounded foliar shrub profile. And Julia Child in England, in the UK, it's got the nickname the absolutely fabulous rose. And now what's to argue with in that regard? Not much, in my opinion. It is waxy foliaged, thus way disease resistant. It is a healthy, vigorous grower friendly, you might say. Minimum disease, grows freely, and is covered in repeat blooms 2, 3, 4 times a year with scads and scads of flowers. And again, let's look at the floribunda type for its profile. Here we have 2 clusters in the cluster floribunda type. One nascent, we'll get back to it, and one actual and even a bit beyond the pale on the fade. So typically floribundas have a center bloom here and here, and then a circle of satellite blooms. So you get a nice spray. It's really great on the plant, but really great in arrangements. Yeah, sure. Trouble is that, as you can see here and there, the center bloom opens appreciably quicker before the satellite blooms. So you never get the full effect of all the blooms. Some folks just live with it. Another alternative would have been to have come and pinch this out before the satellite buds open and go with that. So if I were to do that now, and I'm reticent to do it because it's such a beautiful thing, I would pinch this out and go with the satellites here. Well, what the heck? Painful as it might be, put it on the ground. In about 3 days, we'll have a nice flush of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 blooms. It'll be a real full spray. Among the other, well, oh look. The other day I came and cut roses from this Julia Child. And so you can see with this and what's on the horizon, it is so productive. And the color at its peak is a rich yellow. Yellow can indeed be a bit problematic. You've got your harsh highlighter yellows and your soft, weak, buttery ones. But this Julia Child has a nice, rich yellow. And as for scent, well, yeah, it's got a little bit in the direction of fruity, but strong anise or licorice scent, and it's just really wild. So, Julia Child, the absolutely fabulous rose, and indeed it is. I'm standing here holding a stem of a halfway open, really beautiful counterpart to the Golden Celebration David Austin rose. This is Graham Stewart Thomas. Very similar in many of its respects, I would say. That Golden Celebration is a little richer in its yellowness, and yet this is, well, not half bad. And again, this is the nature of the shrub, and it's just that, a full shrub. Again, you could get it to climb by providing a trellis, or you could keep it in a round, mounded form like this. Its features are these really lush, cup-shaped, many-petaled flowers with a moderate scent, not real strong, but it's there, and an excellent flower certainly in the garden, but also in a cut flower regime. And again, I think the David Austin roses present themselves a little better in terms of their extreme loveliness by being half open before you cut it, not so much in the tight, high-centered bud as you would do for the hybrid teas. So, Graham Stewart Thomas, I might add. Graham Stewart Thomas gets a nod, certainly from David Austin, an Englishman, fellow Brit, Graham Stewart Thomas. He was Britain's foremost garden writer and rosarian for the 20th century. If you're interested in that type of thing, he writes knowledgeably about perennial plants and roses. Okay, another of David Austin's masterpieces. Indeed, he has 200 plus 300 varieties that he's been breeding. Started releasing the early ones in the early 60s, and we all are the benefit of his breeding genius. And I might add, his breeding genius is mostly innate. He didn't have any technical genetics or breeding background, but he sure nailed it. So this is one of two roses that are not dissimilar, which is, of course, to say they're quite similar. This is Golden Celebration, and like its counterpart, Graham Stewart Thomas, can't really decide. What am I? Am I a vigorous bush or a short climber? I will say this about both these varieties, is that they're suggestible. If you put a pillar, a post, a trellis, they'll climb up it. If you leave it alone and prune it in a rounded form, they'll behave accordingly. But this is what you get, and you can see we're on the verge of having an explosion of blooms here. A nice, rich, yellow clusters of flowers. Again, the Austin flowers are a little better, more fully open than the classic hybrid teas, and this has a more than reasonable scent. I wouldn't say it's overwhelming in a positive way like I would about Gertrude Jekyll, but it's a pretty darn good rose. Good for in the garden as a landscape effect, good for cutting. I'm here looking at, in fact, marveling at one of the quintessential David Austin roses, again, the new shrub roses or the new old-fashioned roses. This is the variety Gertrude Jekyll, and it's known for a number of things, but probably most importantly for being arguably, but you wouldn't get an argument from me, one of the most scented roses in the world. In fact, in Spain, in France, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres of this rose being grown on a field scale for oils and other perfumes and other fragrance uses. And it's supplanted a lot of the older damask type roses, which were formerly considered to be the most oil essential fragrant roses. Gertrude Jekyll, it's a pink. It's definitely pink, and some people have trouble with this. I know a lot of floral designers, and they just like recoil. How am I going to mix that with what other colors are in my palette? And that may be a problem, but in and of itself, it's a lovely rose. And it tends to be, initially, this is about a 2.5, 3-year-old shrub, erect, and then at maturation it spreads, so you get a nice full 4, 5, 6 foot by 4, 5, 6 foot round mounded shrub. Gertrude Jekyll. Well, talk about a sweet melody, let's. This is the David Austin rose, James Galway, named after the preeminent Irish flautist. The rest of us just say flute players, but flautist James Galway. And I'm going to use it as an example of the response of a rose to heavy pruning. This rose was literally pruned down to about 20 inches this last February, has subsequently grown and grown and grown, and is going to still grow. And it's just on the tip of blooming. This is an excellent flower. Can be used as a cut flower, yeah. Nice soft pink, rich, highly scented, and as you can see by the bloom potential here, quite productive. So James Galway. Another thing about hard pruning of roses, in general, my approach to pruning, winter dormant pruning of roses is I'll prune them moderately for 2, 3, 4 years, and then I'll give them a hard prune. And some of the idea behind a hard prune is it removes so much of the disease material from the plant that you kind of get a restart in terms of low number of fungal spores. So something you might do from time to time. Here we have a young, just planted out of a 5-gallon container about 3, 4 weeks ago, David Austin rose, named after his granddaughter, Olivia Rose Austin. And let me just say, if you're breeding roses or anything else, you get naming rights. You can name it after anything you want, and a lot of breeders name them after friends and relatives. I will note also that David Austin being a bit of a man of letters, named some of his early roses after characters in Chaucer, and also many after characters in Shakespeare. But his granddaughter, Olivia Rose Austin. Again, you can see the quick establishment and the number of stems and flowers here. It's a grower, it's a bloomer. A nice, soft, mid-pink, easy to look at, yeah, won't hurt the eyes, and easy to arrange with, and of moderate scent. And again, relatively disease resistant, and a repeat bloomer big time, Olivia Rose Austin. I'm standing here with another David Austin authored rose. Susan Ellis Williams. But before I talk about it, let me just kind of back up a little bit of the backstory of where we're at with roses here this spring. Mid-late May 2023, Alan Chadwick Garden, 800-foot elevation, 2-3 miles in from the Pacific Ocean, central coast of California. It was a hard, cold winter. We got 65 inches of rain. It was cold and cold and colder still. That is cold for central coast of California. And didn't it rain? Yeah, sure did. 65 inches again. So our pruning was delayed. We usually do our dormant pruning in January, and then we get resultant growth. And let me just say this about pruning. Once you prune roses, be ready, because it's going to stimulate growth. So you need to be there with some requisite compost, fertilizer, and irrigation as is necessary. Truth of the matter is, May the 20th, I still haven't irrigated these roses this year because we got that much rain. We're good for a while. The harder you prune a rose, the longer and stronger the resultant growth that spring into summer, and thus the somewhat delayed bloom. So if you prune a rose lightly, you'll get many smaller flowers with shorter stems, and they'll come on earlier in the spring. And it'll be a nice landscape effect. If you prune hard, it's, as I said, a lot of growth, a lot of vigor, delayed bloom, and the result is long, strong stems and big buds, and that may suit your needs. Something intermediate is more my preference, where you take about half, a third to half of the previous season's growth back in pruning. That gives you a good, vigorous growth, topped with a goodly number of good-sized flowers with long, strong stems. So you have these three options: light pruning, a landscape effect early in the season; heavy pruning, more growth, fewer flowers, bigger flowers, and all that; and the more intermediate middle path of the best of both worlds. But let's look at this rose here. Again, Susan Ellis Williams, and it is a white rose. And let me just say, a good white rose, and by that I mean good in being truly, purely white, is hard to find. There's only a handful that I can think of offhand, one being the hybrid tea, Pope John Paul II, and another one, an old hybrid tea that's hard to get, but you probably can source it, called Honor. But this is a nice mid-sized shrub with a prolific number of stems, and again a strong repeat blooming. And in bud, it looks not unlike a hybrid tea, that high-centered ovoid bud. When fully open, the petals are recurved and give you this effect here. Its scent is moderate plus, and it is hard to get a good, sweetly scented white rose. The aforementioned Pope John Paul probably wins the race in that regard. It's just, well, it's sinfully scented. Okay, I'm here with Over the Moon, an exquisite hybrid tea rose. It's an offspring of another one that's exquisite, Just Joey here, Over the Moon here. Just Joey is a little stronger in its salmon-like peachy tones. Over the Moon gets a little more creamy in a nice way as it opens, but they're very similar. Nice classic hybrid tea blooms, long, strong stems, good for cutting, lasts for a long time in the vase, and can be cut at a variety of stages. If we look over here, from that stage through this stage, but by even that stage, and certainly this stage, the best thing to do would be to put it on the ground and deadhead it. So some of the beauty and certainly the lastingness and the utility of these modern bush roses, in this case hybrid teas, and more specifically Over the Moon here, is that they need to be cut in fairly tight buds showing full color to just starting to unfurl their petals. A couple critiques, if I might, of hybrid teas: their blooms can be just plain too much, too big. And yet, and the other thing is they need to be cut in tight bud to slightly open. Once they open fully, they lose color, they lose form. So Over the Moon, a relatively new introduction, offspring again of Just Joey, and one that I thought would have caught on more with the public. It's not really in favor, but I certainly favor it. And again, it compares favorably to its parent, Just Joey, but will be a little more in that direction of creamy color when it's mostly open. I'm standing here in the shadow of an excellent modern shrub rose called Polka. And I have a few blooms here in my hand to illustrate my point. A really rich apricot-y salmon color. A mild, slightly fruity, but definitely spicy scent. And a shrub that's, in this case, about to explode with blooms. That's on the positive side. It's an erect shrub, short climber, self-supporting, extremely prolific in the spring, and then only intermittent bloom in the summer. But then it comes on for a great reprise in the fall. Definitely worth having, whether it's in the landscape or if you use it as a cut flower. Bad English as it is, ain't nothing not to like about it. Standing here next to a floribunda rose called Iceberg. And it is both prototypical floribunda, one of the more popular early ones, and yet it is atypical in the sense that most floribundas are low and wide, and this tends to be a taller shrub, but it's still a floribunda. It generally throws its flowers in clusters. It's pure white. Not much to not like about it. Well, you know, it might be in the top 10 of floribundas if it only had a hint of a scent. But it doesn't, and yet a really serviceable rose. I have a little section of it here, and they make an excellent hedge, and they're an excellent cut flower as well. Each bloom has many buds, and it blooms and blooms and blooms again. It's not uncommon for me to be cutting roses off this bush in early mid-December, and that's fairly outstanding. Okay, here I am sidling up to a Grandiflora rose. This is the variety About Face, and here's a couple of cut blossoms. And it's not dissimilar to another Grandiflora, Strike It Rich. We'll talk more about the color in a minute. But let me highlight Grandifloras for you. Someone once said, jokingly, they might be called Grandibushes. They are very erect and upright. A short one is 5 or 6 feet tall. A tall one would be 7 or 8 feet tall. It's a kind of obscure class of roses. There aren't very many of them, and in my opinion, not very many of them are worth growing in terms of the beauty of the bloom. But certainly About Face and Strike It Rich are. So when roses have bicolored petals, it usually goes to the strong color is on the inside and the weak color is on the lower side. About Face, well, topsy-turvy, upside down, inside out, would be just the opposite. The outer or lower side of the petals are dark, rich, warm, bronzy orange. The inner petals are more light golden yellow. And it's a nice display, whether it's in bud or partially open on the bush. Additionally, Both of these roses, the aforementioned Strike It Rich, which is a little more yellow, a little less bronzy gold and bicolored, both of them have a nice, moderate, spicy fragrance. You have heard me talk about different colors, and some I like and some I don't. Let me just say I've been taken by them, infatuated with what I'm going to call shades of warm orange, copper, salmon, apricot, peach, to the point where friends and colleagues, and you want to have colleagues that are your friends, say, Orin, you got to knock it off. Well, maybe, maybe not, but they offer so much in terms of the warm glow to their blooms, are easy to work with other colors in arrangement, and they just knock your socks off.